Beautiful. Hope everybody's well. Welcome back to the show. He's a first-time guest. I wanted to try and do an MK-esque intro. It's 3 a.m. I must be lonely, that type of stuff. But I didn't think I could do it justice. So his name's Brian Campbell. He's a man that wears many hats that we're going to hear all about today. So how are you, Brian? You okay?
Oh, dude, I'm fired up to connect with you, who created the most emotional, incredible song that we added to our documentary number 2 in Morning Kombat history, that I think really defined the prime era of this struggling show's history, Damo. So congrats out to you, brother.
That was like was it late 2020 or early 2021, something like that?
Yeah, it was definitely in the midst of the throes of the pandemic.
Yeah.
You took, what was that, Ricky Martin? I don't know,
Enrique
Enrique.
Iglesias, yeah, Heroes, I think it was, yeah.
I mean, you took it and you put the perfect mixture of sophomoric humor and just an unnecessary amount of soul and, like, longing love in your voice, that I was like, all right, this guy gets us. He does. He
No,
gets
that's
us.
awesome. That's awesome. Well, I did off the bat, I think the semi-drunk Mike Tyson watch-alongs in 2020 that you and Luke did were like some good core memories for me back in
Oh,
2020
nice.
during COVID. So I wanted to thank you off the bat for that. So for people who haven't heard your name before, do you think you could give us a bit of a Cliff's Notes of
Sure.
who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. I am a combat sports passionate fiend who is very lucky these days to be a MMA and boxing writer for CBS Sports here in the States, an analyst for CBS Sports HQ, their 24/7 news network, co-host of the award-winning Morning Kombat podcast along with Luke Thomas. You can obviously find us on YouTube. We are, or try to be, the intersection of truth and absurdity here in combat sports. And my biggest passion in life, outside of my wife and kids, boxing broadcasting. I've been lucky enough to call fights in the States for Showtime, for many other elite networks, and juggling a few sort of opportunities this calendar year in the aftermath of Showtime's departure. But yeah, there ain't nothing I love more than being ringside, adding my voice to the soundtrack of my favorite thing going. So
Mm.
I'm living a blessed dream life. I am multifaceted in the combat sports space, and I'm a washed 46-year-old dad who enjoys long walks on the beach. So thanks for having me.
Beautiful. Drinking martinis and talking about your feelings.
There it is.
Beautiful.
That's the way to live for your life, right? Cry a little bit, fart a little bit, whatever you got going on. Just let it all out. All right.
What was the first boxing fight that got you hooked on it?
Oh, easy answer right there. And the answer is going to be 1987's Sugar Ray Leonard versus Marvelous Marvin Hagler, a pay-per-view so big that me at 8 years old has a dad who's never, ever been into sports on an extreme level. But that was the type of fight, with the unknown of Sugar Ray Leonard coming off a 3.5 year retirement, and the threat of an eye injury that was going to potentially make the rest of his life catastrophic, coming back and moving up in weight against maybe the greatest middleweight of all time, in a rivalry that had already really been festered. To be an 8-year-old, to have a dad catch that bug at his job so thickly of, like, the big fight feel, where it's like, doesn't matter. I mean, these are the dream fights, right? These are the
Okay.
fights that go beyond fight fans, that bring in those casuals. When my dad goes, we're getting the fight, we're going to go to your grandparents' house. It's like a Monday night, by the way, back in
Right.
87. And we're going to have a party, and you're going to watch this fight, which turns out to be one of the greatest disputed decisions in big time title fights. I don't know how I could not have come out of that. The grounds were built for a huge boxing fandom, because I had that fight taped on VHS, rewatched it a million times. But it's not just that fight. I want to be fair here. I'm a child of the late 70s. So when I come up and get into popular mainstream movies while still, in elementary school, the Rocky movie series, Sylvester Stallone, I mean, that had an impact you can't even quantify for who I am today as a boxing fan. That leads into coming home from school every day, turning on ESPN and watching replays of Hagler Hearns basically every day, right? Watching Muhammad Ali's career retrospective, that it just starts to come together, that you go, there's something different about this sport. It was enough to entrap my dad. And then on my mom's side, I had a grandfather in Pennsylvania who, had no problem telling a young kid, hey, you're not in control of this TV. I am. But he always put on boxing on Saturday night. So it's weird how these moments sort of kind of enthrall you to the sport that is much more real seemingly than the others. But as you get into it, as you join it as either extreme fan or eventually me as a journalist, you begin to find out that it has all those elements. It's also it's also constant bullshit and hijinks at all times. So I
Yeah.
think if you become someone who has a flavor for that, for the crazy, the corrupt, the ridiculous, boxing is all of that. But yeah, man, I circle that one fight, Leonard versus Hagler, as I'll never forget what that big fight build and feel meant. And it's the same drug I've been re-experiencing through Mayweather, Canelo, Mayweather,
Mm.
Pacquiao, Mayweather, McGregor, and all the other, landmark fights that I've been lucky enough to be on the ground for.
Yeah, right. Who did this? I guess like enchantment in the boxing world carry on for your dad after that fight the way it did for you?
Not in a fight by fight, year by year basis, but I will
Mm.
say my dad's still living. We get along great. But when I look back at what are our greatest moments, it really was Mike Tyson's post jail pay-per-view run in the mid 90s, which coincided perfectly with us acquiring one of those black cable boxes where you can get all the
Mm.
pay-per-views for free, which was the trend back then. And obviously today's streaming days, in
Yeah.
terms of illegal streaming, is still the trend in many ways. But there became this father-son bond within that, but with not just Tyson post jail, but also the early UFC pay-per-views. I'm talking
Mm.
UFC 3, 4, 5, 6, where it became this odd street corner in our basement where my dad and I could coexist, hang out, and find a lot of laughs and a lot of great
Mm.
moments. So it's weird. It's like that Hagler Hearns fight started me on a boxing journey that wasn't always addictive and intense. There were definitely highs and lows. The early heavyweight 90s scene, I was back in a big way. But I came and went throughout the years. But yeah, this sport connects so many of us to our fathers, to our grandfathers. And for me, particularly, again, for me being a sports fiend as a kid, studying
Yeah.
almanacs, memorizing every stat, and my dad not having that as part of his, life recreation enjoyments, to connect with that over Tyson, to see, never forget when Tyson bites Holyfield's ear in the second fight, which everybody remembers where they were. Never forget my dad standing up, swearing at the TV, yelling that Tyson be jailed and deported while yelling the F word over and over. These are the moments you
Right. Yeah.
remember and you savor. So yeah, that all played a big role.
It's a lot of theater. I feel like. Real quick, what's an almanac?
An almanac is a sort of dictionary, but it
Oh, okay.
connects not, or let's say an encyclopedia that instead houses season by season sports facts. You could
Oh
buy
shit.
almanacs that cover entire years,
Right. Okay.
decades,
Okay.
or do it by sport. So I had bookshelves in the 80s of
Crazy.
every baseball stat, football stat, that kind of stuff.
Wow, that's crazy. Okay, yeah. I was born in 97. So some of that stuff I didn't know. So if there's any other words, I'm
Oh,
definitely going to
sure.
ask, but it's I guess a similar question is for the UFC side of things. Like the first time I discovered the UFC was the GSP Nick Diaz press conference where
Yes.
Nick like didn't show up or something like that. And my dad bought me a magazine with Nick Diaz on the cover that was a UFC magazine when the fighters still wore like custom shorts. And I think Phil Davis had donuts or pink shorts. Like I think he ended up fighting for Bellator, but he was like a big fighter back then. What was a fight for the MMA side of things that got you hooked in the same way?
Okay, so I'm lucky enough to have been there early, like I mentioned. I didn't watch UFC 1 the night it aired or anything, but I distinctly remember, a lot of people remember that the comedy of one of those early UFC fights when Joe San got punched in the balls by Keith Hackney about 100 times and eventually tapped out, right? I remember that fight being a turning point in my grandfather losing his ish, talking about it, laughing to the point of tears coming down. Then it's like, okay, we need to check out UFC. So I definitely watched UFC 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I
Okay.
eventually hit a wall when that sport stopped being it got banned from pay-per-view. It stopped being easy to consume. And also I think you saw the early Hoist Gracie effect, where the Gracies began to so dominate every
Mm.
other fighting style that it became a little bit boring.
Right.
I got in and out of MMA in the ensuing years, which I think a lot of people did when the sport disappeared for a while and came back. Maybe it was that run with Ken Shamrock, Tito Ortiz, Chuck Liddell that brought a lot of us back in. But if I'm going to point to one fight, without question, it's the 2006 pay-per-view between Rampage Jackson and Chuck Liddell in the UFC. that I remember I was working at ESPN in Connecticut. It was only my second year there. I was a big boxing guy. I was an intrigued MMA fan, but that was the first fight that I distinctly remember those in power at ESPN buying into it a little bit, raising their eyebrow and going, wow, there's a lot of attention around this event. It feels like a big boxing pay-per-view. What is this? And I remember watching that in the newsroom with people who hadn't even watched UFC before. Some of them hadn't even heard of it. And I watched the excitement of that fight, the personality of Rampage coming in with the chains and the barking. And, so many of us knew who Liddell was as sort of the face of that sport. And to see that sort of changeover, passing of the guard in a sense, it was incredible. It was exciting. It felt so much like boxing. And I remember thinking in that moment, I'm probably going to have to get into this sport on a really extreme level moving forward, because it's coming on and it's coming for boxing's place. And if it's going to feel or taste like this event did, I can't miss this moving forward.
So, since I've followed your work, which would have been like 2019 when MK started, or 2020, my time might be wrong on that. Since then, it's been pretty clear in how you've talked about career opportunities that you'll take. If an opportunity comes to you, you will take advantage of it and try to rinse as much a juice out of the orange or something like that, right? So how did you find yourself at ESPN? For Australians, ESPN is still something that seems like pretty deeply entrenched in sports media.
Yes.
Like, it's a pretty big brand. So was that a big time for you in your life, making it there? Like, is that sort of the goal for most people in your field?
It's the only goal. You have to remember, I grew up 20 minutes outside of the Bristol, Connecticut campus. So,
Okay.
I toured ESPN a few times as a student in school. It was this impossible dream for all of us. My entire youth of memorizing sports facts and almanacs and watching every sport and being that nerdy savant stat kid, every single person I ever met, through middle school, high school, college, was like, oh, you're going to end up as a sports center anchor one day. This is what you're destined to do. But look, life takes you on different turns. I never expected to drop out of college. I never expected to sort of hit I guess you could say, an early kind of quarter life crisis. I was always a sports journalist on a newspaper level, back when newspapers held the tail end of a time when they held a much firmer grasp as the internet was still coming abound. But, I look back on those stretches and what was the exact pinpoint of your question? I just lost track.
No, it's okay. Basically, what was it like getting to working for ESPN?
Gotcha.
And sort of hitting that, I guess, milestone?
So it's everyone's dream to get there. And I hit this point in my mid-20s where I kind of was a college dropout, a little bit aimless. I was in the sports writing game, but, really hit some dead ends. And I think I finally got to a point where I'm like, okay, I got to take my swing. I was 25, 26. I've got to do what it takes. I remember actively getting myself together, getting my resume together, getting my courage together, and thinking, whatever it takes, I got to get in that building, or that campus, and I've got to figure out where I belong there. I was lucky to get an opportunity in 2005. I'm about 27. I had an in on a project part-time evening job at ESPN that was only going to be for like 6 months. It was kind of a crappy technical Q&A support job. But I remember thinking, even though I had to wake up every day at 6 a.m. for my day job, and even though I'm juggling writing jobs on the side, I remember thinking, this is my shot. This is my chance to prove in this kind of crappy job that no one's watching. Can I stay? Can I linger? It was a long journey in my 12 years there, but I lingered. And I'm to the spirit of your question, I'll say the first 5, 6, 7, 8 years there, I thought I'd made it. I was just happy to be there. I remember specifically, I started there in 2005. I had my first byline, my first story written in 2010. It was a one-on-one interview with Mickey Ward when he was coming through ESPN to promote the movie The Fighter that he did, that Mark Wahlberg did on his life. And I remember thinking at that moment, man, if I could get the boxing editor at ESPN.com to approve me writing this story, and if I could do it, that'd be the greatest moment of my career. I would frame that story, put it up on the wall, and that would be, the high watermark. That's everything's gravy from here. And, it's amazing that I was able to keep a job at ESPN, begin to wiggle up, climb the ladder, create these moments like having my first byline, which, led to me just constantly knocking on doors and pushing for opportunities, none of it for pay, where that led to me hosting digital shows there about boxing. So it really became a long slithering road, a hard road and a hard climb. But yeah, just getting in the building at ESPN, it was literally like I would be like, I don't care, work me overnights, I'll cut hockey highlights, whatever it is. I just want to be a part of this. That lasted for a while. That was
Mm,
sort of like, wow, I did this, I made this. I guess I'm lucky enough that I hit certain hurdles or detours where I had to look in the mirror and say, what do I really want to do? I'll never forget 2010. A boss sits me down and goes, hey, you've been a pretty good employee for us the last 5.5 years. I want to help you. What do you want to be here? Do you want to be a NFL editor? Do you want to be an NBA blogger? I can help. I can make some calls upstairs. I can help you become what you want. And I had established myself at that point as kind of the fight guy in our newsroom. But I remember saying, I want to be a boxing writer. And I'll never forget this boss looking me in the eye and going, you're a father, you have children. I'm sure you want to send them to college one day. This sport is dead. If it was any other sport, I could help you out today. He goes, how many people that you follow make a living exclusively doing this
mm,
job? And I remember it was a sobering moment. I'm like, Dan Rayfield at ESPN, Kevin Iole at Yahoo, maybe Chris Mannix half the time at Sports Illustrated at the time. You know, people have to juggle other beats, other sports,
mm.
whether it's NBA and boxing or MMA and boxing. And I remember just looking him in the eye, not knowing what words were going to come next and going, not me, boss. You can't pick what you love. This is what I love. I'm going to find a way. So, I guess I'm lucky to have identified that as my passion and potential calling. And really, it was a combination of never giving up, never saying no when you hear endless no's. I mean, I've knocked on doors, offered, my services to be on TV so many times and have been told every possible form of no. We can't sell you to an audience. You're too green. No one's heard of you, blah, 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 blah. But the combination of realizing and feeling like I was meant for more, and just the simple reality of not making any headway in that company financially, having to pay the bills, having young children, having a rent that you can barely pay and keep the heat on in the winter. I guess I fell into the right place at the right time with the right motivation and the right, I guess, work ethic / goals and dreams that I was able to persevere in a pretty, tough, dark sport, where it's hard to get ahead and make a name for yourself. And certain things happened along the way at ESPN that got me linked with MMA. I went from being a promising boxing writer, editor, host to them going, no, we're switching your roles. You're now the MMA editor, and we're going to send you to every single pay-per-view. And it just so happens that's when Conor McGregor was on the rise. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's always timing. It's always a lot of that kind of brings you together, opens up new doors. I covered pro wrestling at the highest level for 4 years and was a big part of starting that coverage at ESPN, which is wild because now I don't even watch pro wrestling,
Yeah.
for even a second. But life takes you on some wild maneuverings, but getting into ESPN was a monster milestone. I guess I'm happy to say that I hit certain points there where I said, okay, this is it, but is this enough? Isn't there
Yeah.
more? And I kept pushing, and I've been able to find it. Never easy though, dude.
Yeah.
When I get people on LinkedIn, college kids, hey BC, I love your work, I love your style. How do I end up exactly like you? I
Yeah.
go,
There's not really like
I
yeah.
I go, don't follow my path, dude, because you're going to be out of money and out of hope for long stretches, and you better hope that you either have the love for it or you have a need to accomplish this that overcomes everything else. Because that's the only way I'm standing right here, about to, get on a plane and go host events for Canelo this week. Who would have thought, right?
Yeah. And so on that timeline, you wrote your first article that got published, I guess, on Mickey Ward 5 years in. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So if that was maybe a moment for you of like, holy shit, I've made it. Like I've done this. I've done what I sort of set out to do. How did you figure out ways to, because I'm dealing with this now, right? I'm 27. I've got I've got a good job. I've got the house. I got married. I've got everything that you're sort of, like, at least from my perspective in life, you're sort of told what you're supposed to aim for. And then you spend a bit of time looking around and thinking like, fuck, I've done it all already. Like, how often were there moments like that for you, if you sort of reached the peak of, you reached what you wanted to do, and that's fairly early compared to a lot of people to do it in, I guess, what would that be for you, your early 30s, writing that article? Like,
Sure.
how was that for you? Was there like a come down from like reaching that mountaintop, I guess?
There's been constant come down. There's been constant leveling out. So I'll give you a great example. When I left ESPN and finally got a big financial opportunity to go to CBS, which is the job I still hold, but it looked a little differently back then, just to get an opportunity to write and do on-air work full time, not in my hobbies for not for pay, but full time. I remember that first year being depressed as ever, not because I didn't love the job or it wasn't fun, but just being like, I thought this was everything I wanted. I'm here. I guess I want more, or I guess I want
Yeah.
something different. But yeah, I went through that a lot at ESPN, and I'm lucky and happy to have gone through that. As much as I could sit here and tell you this great inspirational story of never giving up, I also tried to give up a lot, meaning, when you're working at ESPN and you're working overnights for years at a time, and your body is ravaged, you barely talk to your friends or family because your whole job is this life. And there's many times I tried to get out and go take what I call, everyman civilian jobs, sell insurance, deliver, whatever, just so many times. And I guess I'm blessed and happy that God had a plan for me where those doors constantly closed. There were many times I went to interviews, got hired, and then was told the next day, sorry, the person you were going to replace is coming back. We have to let you go now. You can't take the job. Like a lot of those moments where I think at some point I just went like, okay, there's enough signs here to show me that maybe I should continue down this path. But it was never like, oh, I'm definitely doing this. This is the only way. Sometimes, like I said, I was lucky enough to be in such a financial need where there were points where I'd be on TV for ESPN. Grateful, blessed, beyond belief. People could see me on Facebook and be like, man, BC's made it. The
Yeah.
reality is I was borrowing money from my church to pay rent so that my kids could be warm at night, making no money as an editor at ESPN. Like I've been through enough really hard moments where you look in the mirror where you have to say, am I stretching out a dream that is not possible? And is my family suffering because of it? Or am I hearing enough signs? Are the vibrations and rumbles in my heart enough to show me that anything is possible in this life? And maybe there is more for me. And maybe I'm the last to realize that and find out. Because I have to tell you, I spent most of my life jealous of everybody else who grew up with what I call a gift, a skill, people that can pick up the guitar and learn it in a month and be playing whatever songs they want, or that just have a natural, business acumen and can go to college and get right into the workforce. I felt like, man, I hadn't been dealt anything. And yet now that I'm in the dream jobs that I have, I literally look back at every point in my life and realize how pivotal each of those moments were to create the skills that I actually need now, or those personality quirks when I thought, okay, it's cool that I can entertain talking about nothing, but where's the value in that? Now I'm actually making value in that. So, in hindsight, I can see now where it was all there and where all the chess pieces were being laid out. But there wasn't just one or two moments of truth. That sometimes it was a daily, weekly moment of truth to ask myself, is this possible? Is this worth it? Can I do this? I bring back that conversation with my boss where he said, how many people are actually making a good living doing this kind of thing that you want to do? I had many of those long nights. If I have to say one thing got me through or pushed me over the top, my kids were born 4.5 months premature. I have twin sons that are 16 now. They were born in 2008, not given a hope to live, had extreme medical issues that we were told on a daily to weekly basis that they weren't going to live more than a few months. They each had 6 surgeries the first year, barely survived each one, and each needed essentially medical miracles to survive, meaning where doctors would tell you, hey, there's a 0% chance of survival. Take your sons home, take a lot of pictures, and, be there peacefully when they pass. And yet these guys would come out of surgery with body parts being grown back. And my kids were, just mesmerizing gifts from above that make no sense. And I think when I saw the fighting spirit of my kids, I couldn't touch them or hold them for months because they're in this incubator and they're 1 pound. It was a sobering experience to say, these are my offspring and they are fighting tooth and nail just to live,
Yeah.
just to breathe. I cannot even begin to tell you when you look in the mirror and think you have a work ethic, but then you start to realize, like, what if I had that same attitude? What if I had the belief that nothing is irrational or improbable? It really comes down to just how much I'm willing to believe that it's possible and how much I'm willing to get out of my own way. Because here's the key. It's not always so much like, who do I talk to? Show me where to network. Show me how do I climb the ladder? How do I get this job? I think ultimately the biggest hurdles are ourselves, our own small levels of human belief in terms of what's possible, typically fueled by, how we were raised, what kind of town you're from, whether you were told to believe big in dreams or not. And, I was raised great. But did I believe all this was possible? No, not at any point, really. It was a step-by-step process of waking up and going, I've seen these miracles in my kids. I've seen the passion that they have today for life, for everything that they're interested in, just throwing themselves after. I didn't have to look too far for inspiration than in my own house. And that affected me in a big way to just get out of my own way and realize that these fears that I have that I thought were, safety marks were like, guardrails on the side to keep me firm were actually the biggest things holding me back from realizing that what do we do in our free time? We celebrate the supernatural constantly, people achieving things that no one ever thought was possible, breaking Olympic records, right? Saving people from a burning house, performing medical miracles. We celebrate the crazy and the irrational. Yet then we look at our own lives in the mirror and we go, nah, that's not for me. I'm
Mm.
supposed to, sell insurance and retire and hopefully have enough money to vacation at the end of my life. It took a lot of me going like, maybe I'm the biggest problem in me getting ahead. And I think once I figured that out, once I got out of my own way, which was a long process, it took some mental health focusing in on and really just kind of reframing the computer up here. I found the secret, and the secret is that nothing's improbable or
Mm.
impossible in this life if you believe it. And you can chalk that up to Tony Robbins or
Yeah,
or
yeah.
any other kind of nice little put it on a sign over your shoulder and never stop looking at it. But it's real. I'm here to tell you it's real.
I've got one more question, and then we'll bail because I know you've got a flight, and feel free to answer this however you'd like. If you could go back to a 25-year-old version of you, knowing what you know now about yourself and about life, what do you think you would tell that person, assuming he listens to you?
So that's a great question, and I love these type of questions. But for me, I literally hit that quarter life crisis at 25, where my years of debauchery that I now, by the way, look back on and realize the role of undocumented depression and anxiety in my life, at a time in the late 90s, especially, where we certainly weren't talking about that. And, I don't even realize my own family extended history in this topic. So I think I in hindsight now take some of the guilt and blame off of myself for a stretch in my life in my early 20s that was just, rock star-esque in terms of the debauchery. But I hit my own sort of rock bottom wall, had a sort of a spiritual intervention that saved me from a lot of the demons in my own life. But I think when I look back on that, if I could tell myself something without question, it would be this. Because that was the beginning where I said, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to turn my life around. No idea where it's going, what it's going to look like, but it's like, okay, gonna get in shape, gonna get my finances in order. Did all those things, right? Cleaned up my apartment, did all those things to start it. But what I still didn't know are the most important things, the lessons that you learn up here. I would tell myself that you don't actually have to know how to get where you want to go. You literally just have to put one foot in front of the other. And I believe really wholeheartedly, and I don't know if it's like some power of attraction thing or whatever, however you want to frame it, whether you want to frame it in a religious sense or in a whatever, however you want to frame it. I think if you boldly walk in the directions of your dreams, and when I say boldly, I mean by announcing it, by saying I'm actively going after this. I do think, however you want to chalk it up, that the universe cosigns that with you and begins to open up doors, begins to provide you with the kind of relationships that'll get you to the next level, the kind of job opportunities. How many times have we received something that we thought was bad? It was really in disguise. It was a gift, a job where you go, hey, I got this job offer, but that's not what I want to do. And you turn out that that's the cross training that you needed at that point of your life, whether to, build the work ethic or give you a new look at things. I would love to go back and tell myself or anybody that's at these same crossroads that the biggest hurdle I had outside of maybe not believing in myself or that it wasn't possible for me was that I said, oh, it's too late, man. I'm already 25. I dropped out of college. I can't do the things I want to do, like be a sports announcer, because I didn't go directly from high school to college with that dream. I didn't take those college interning classes. I didn't work at this network when I was 19. I didn't, work at the college TV station. I'm behind. I don't have time. If I could have told myself back then that whether you're talking about 25, 50, 75, whatever age you are, it's never too late to do what you want to do, with the calling, with the passions of your heart are calling for. I'll tell you firsthand right now, that line they say, if you work in your passion and your dream, you'll never work a day in your life. That is 1000% true. You don't know how you're going to get there, but as long as you believe, and obviously it's an irrational belief. This is what I'm talking about. Like, we live in these walls of possibilities that we say, I can only believe what's probable or what's rational for me. once I was able to kick down those walls, I saw that the power of your belief deep inside is your true superpower in getting you there. And you don't have to know what step comes next. You'll never know, right? You're never going to be able to be shown the path that's ahead of you. You can think you have a clue, right? But the best laid plans of man typically always, come afoul when you begin to try to author your own road exactly. But if you are open-minded and you believe and you are willing to be long-suffering, you are willing to work hard, you're willing to hold that belief in the face of signs that would tell most people to go in the other direction. How many times have I pitched myself at ESPN or other jobs for something grand that was above me, and people looked me in the eye and said, love your passion, but this is not for you. It won't work here. Those are the type of conversations that lead people to go back to jobs that they don't want to do for the rest of their lives. Again, maybe I was lucky that my financial need with 2 young kids was so strong that I pushed back past those, because I said, no, I have to make this happen no matter what. I had the onus, the impetus, the MO to do it. But you don't need that exact MO. You need to look in the mirror and say, I don't know how I'm going to get there tomorrow. And tomorrow may be a year, 5 years, 10 years. But my current reality is a setup for a slow, long death. This job I go to that is my right job right now is going to turn this heart dark and sorrowful in the long run if I don't chase after the passions, the callings of my heart. And not always will your true passions align with your day job. You can be in a job you're good at. You might not be fully passionate about it, but it's for you. Maybe your passions come in your hobbies. But the idea to my 25-year-old self that nothing is impossible and you don't have to know the details or plans to get there. You just have to be willing, and you have to keep moving forward, fail forward, fall forward, get back up a million times when you fall. It's possible for you, because you'll find when you get there that it's not the most talented people around you in the end. It is, though, the most hard-nosed, persevering people who at some point decided to believe in themselves, in the possibility that good things happen, that hard work pays off, that God has a plan for your life. However you want to frame it, everyone's got to figure out their own path and journey in relation to that. But I would look back and say, like, stop wasting time worrying about things that you're never going to be able to control. Just worry about every single day becoming better, and every single day taking another step closer to where you're supposed to be, that you'll get there. And there'll be trials, and there'll be times in round 11 you'll be knocked down, and you're gonna figure out if you're gonna get back up. But from somebody who kept getting back up, whether it was advised or not, you can get your hand raised in the end. It is possible, man. Fear is what do they say in the movie Dune? That was the constant refrain. Fear is
the mind killer. Yeah.
I couldn't echo that. Put that on a t-shirt, put that on a poster in your bedroom. Fear is a lie that we have constantly told our subconscious, our supercomputer, as a protection, as a guardrail. But those guardrails can also hold you back from what you're supposed to do. So just believe. You don't have to have the answers. Just believe.
Beautiful. I'm too cheap to pay for a Zoom membership, so we've got 3 minutes on this bad boy. Let people know how they can hear more from you, whether it's MK, whether it's the new Brian Campbell Experience. Plug all that stuff, and then we'll make a move.
Yeah, thank you for the plug. Morning Kombat, as of right now, every Monday on YouTube at Morning Kombat, 11 a.m. Eastern on Mondays. An expansion to Friday is coming, by the way. Good news to report. My own personal channel, the Brian Campbell Experience, just launched on YouTube, youtube.com/the Brian Campbell Experience. Check it out. Fun interviews, off-the-wall content, combat sports, and more coming your way. You can read my work at cbssports.com, and I will be broadcasting a small handful of interesting boxing events that you may see me on TV for in the near future. So tune in, along with September 20th on UFC Fight Pass. Hey, I'll be in Dublin on the call of Callum Walsh, the young Irish prospect's next big fight. So excited for that, and so much more coming. Appreciate the chance to chat with you, man.
That's right. I appreciate you taking the time. I really appreciate it. And it makes me feel good seeing you succeed. Just on that level, just based on sort of watching your content for a long time now, having it help me through some interesting points in my own life. I really appreciate the work you do. So thank you again for that, Brian. I'll quickly turn this off and ask you one more question before I go, but thank you again for the time. I really appreciate it, bud.
Thank you.